Mahalo.
Aloha nui kako, it's Kapa Hawaiian FM and another edition of the Kapa Cafe. As promised, we are featuring another wonderful Hawaiian leader in our community, and we've been talking about her all week. Joining us today, Kumu Hina. Aloha mai e ke hoa.
Ai aloha mai ka aua e ka ea mahalo anu ia oe ko leo kono mai au e launa puno I ka aua ma ke ia wahi. Laina noho I o kaleki o. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Mahalo ya oi. You know, we've mahalo ya oi no ke ia noho ana kuka kami ilio ana. You know, pi hoi hoi no. We are so excited because Jazz and I have been sharing about Kapaemahu. And I'd like to start with the inspiration of how this idea came to be before we start to highlight where it's at right now. Tell us how it all started, Kumu Hina.
Mahalo. When I was but a mere keiki, we spent many days at the beach at Waikiki, and we never really knew the story behind these great pohakuola. And the idea that I and my friends and family sat on the stones, we laid out and warmed ourselves. Who could really imagine that one day I'd end up at the University of Hawaii, and in those circles and Hawaiian studies was where I first learned about the history of these stones. And by the late 90s, I was working for an organization called Keolamamo, the Lea Nue Nue HIV Prevention Education Unit. And we did our best to go around in the communities talking about the concept of Mahu. And so part of the homework that we had to do was to find examples of how Mahu appear or are portrayed and referred to in our culture and history. To our surprise, there really isn't much of anything to do about Mahu except the brief smatterings and the brief appearances here and there. And so I recall that talking about it was simply a point of reference. It was an adjective. And so fast forward a little bit further in 2001, Ke Kulana He Mahu came out and it was mentioned there. And I was a part of that film. And then and then in 2011, my two friends, Dean Hamer and Joe Wilson, approached me about following me to make a film. And so yet again, I reiterated the story of Kapaemahu. And they thought it was interesting. They thought my story was interesting. So simultaneously, while following me around, we had also given more time to do more homework on the story, and eventually the original manuscript that helped to serve as basis for the entry into Thrum's Hawaiian Almanac in the early
Wow.
1900s. And that is the only recording that we see in a quote unquote original manuscript type format. And it speaks to the duality of the individuals. It speaks to their being physically male, but their bodies, their mannerisms, their voice were far more reflective of female. And it speaks to four individuals. So it's not something that we had conjured out of thin air. It's based on the homework that we find, of which I must acknowledge that our articulation of this story does differ from at least one other particular rendering that others in the community do have. So anyway, I made that decision that we would honor the story as we found it.
Now, I've been watching and doing my little research as to the short film. Tell me about how you guys actually came to this decision to portray the mo'olelo as such.
how did we come upon how did we
Well,
make the decision to
yeah, because they were following you around, but you guys chose to depict it in a cartoon fashion. Is cartoon the right word?
well, um I think that the more appropriate term is animation.
Animation, yeah, animation,
You
because it's
know, for those
profound.
mahalo. For those of us who understand how very specific sometimes our olelo makuahine gets, we also understand how sometimes the nuances in English language are also um, very important to consider. So when we think about the word cartoon is often associated with Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Bugs Bunny,
Hmm.
and those kinds of cartoon characters.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we choose many times cartoon characters are um, an eclectic mix of all kinds. Sometimes they're larger than life. Sometimes they are parodies. Sometimes they are meant simply for entertainment purposes. Um, in the case of animation, we have what is considered a part of our history, and yet we also have the element of beyond the physical. And
Right.
so animation, to animate something means to bring something to life. And I felt that there was really no better way than to tell a story of these legendary figures, these four individuals that came from the lands of Kahiki, the lands to the south, lands that are also known to be ancestral homelands to our people.
I
And so, what better way to bring these figures from our history and make them larger than life, because they had such wonderful ability and wonderful knowledge and skill that they were so loved by the people that four great stones were erected in their honor. So I think that animation really does lend to it.
thank you for in educating the world, including myself, on the difference between, you're right, that is so true, cartoon and animation. Now, the one thing I wanted to ask today is, there is a worldwide view. There's more, how do I say, there's more people, there's platforms of sharing, including social media, television, the internet, on how people are coming to understand or educate themselves on all different levels. With this creation of Kapaemahu in animation, what is the one thing you hope people will receive when they watch this short film?
There are different elements that I hope people will receive. One, that it is absolutely essential for us as Kanaka to control our narrative, and for us as Kanaka in control of our narrative to tell our history and the stories within. It is also important to understand that our people have so many significant moments in time that we often lose ourselves in the current of American and Western type of indoctrination and colonization, so that we gravitate away from our own stories, our own history, and that we look forward to and we embrace another people and another culture's history, another culture's language. We often find ourselves looking outside rather than looking within. Even when we think of more Western oriented, age appropriate. I'm not a fan of age appropriate, but age appropriate programming for young people to watch. And so adults seem to think that putting cartoons on, that's the application that I use for cartoon, to put on a cartoon so that they can watch it, so that it isolates the young child's mind away from reality and thrusts it into a realm of a utopian kind of worldview. And by the time they get to adult age, reality sets in. So I'd like to think of us Kanaka in our homeland as simply ripe for the opportunity to tell these stories, to honor ourselves, to honor our people, uplift the name of Hawaii and our own histories, embrace, for example, when the concept of Mahu comes forward, it's okay to embrace this understanding. It's not something that we have to be negative towards. And it's not necessarily something that we want to overly emphasize, but at the same time, we have been so indoctrinated into another society's way of
Mhm.
thinking
Mhm.
that in order to counter that and to restore a better balance in terms of who we are and to even understand that Mahu stand next to Kane and Wahine, no better, no worse, but we're there as a part of the wonderful fabric of Kapa cloth that makes us who we are.
Beautiful. I don't have any other words to say. Um, I personally, we've always grown up in my household. We've always had arakala with us. You know, it was always there was no difference. There was no difference, and it's a beautiful thing to share your heart, so that our community who's listening, our Kappa community worldwide, if you're watching this on Facebook, on Zoom, if you're watching this or listening to this in your car, may you be inspired. Now, zooming forward, Kumu Hina, the Oscar nomination. What, how do you feel?
I'm speaking directly to the Kanaka community, nobody else, for this particular response to your question. The only reason why any award, any commendation, any applause that we get, only reason why it would be meaningful or worth something to me is if it uplifts Hawaii, if it uplifts our Kanaka, if it puts our culture first, and if it restores dignity, honor, and respect to this great understanding of whom we can be as Kanaka, as we should see ourselves for ourselves, not see ourselves through the Western lens of what outsiders think we're supposed to be or what outsiders think we really are. So, if it be that we're considered to, I mean, just even to be considered in the running, how wonderful. That's that's a given that we would certainly be humbled and appreciate such great honor. But for me, what's most important is that the name of Hawaii is elevated. The name of our Lahui is elevated. The name of my ancestors and their honor is highlighted. And for those people who may not agree with my telling of the story, aole pilikia, ke aloha nui to them. But it should serve as a springboard for them to start telling the stories that ring and echo in their hearts and tell the stories that they feel are the stories that they should tell.
I hope that those that are watching and listening today will take some time to be inspired to watch the short film, as many of us have, and that we be inspired, like you say, to tell our story through our lens. Kumuhina, it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. I wish we could do like once a month Kumuhina talks on
We
Kapa.
can.
Could we really? I just
Yes, of
once a
course.
month. Let's
We
do
can.
a Kumu up and really the intention is to I this is everything that I do, we do is to uplift our community. And so when your words touch my heartstrings, because in everything we do, that's the intention. That's the intention. So I'm going to think about this. I'm going to come back with how we can do this Kuhina minute of uplifting our community so that the work continues. The work continues. And if we as Kapa Ohana can be a part of sharing the message in a broader platform consistently and continually, that we could do more. Kumu Hina,
Mahalo. Mahalo.
mahalo ya oi no ke ia hui ana. Mahalo no ke ia
Mahalo.
vai maka. Ya oi.
Mahalo nui. Tita ka ea. Mahalo.